Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly Roberts of WILD Studio in New York City and a committee member of the Women in Lighting and Design, or WILD, New York and national groups. Welcome to WILD New York's webinar, Examining Diversity, Black Women, and the Lighting Industry. The genesis of this event was our immediate response to the Black Lives Matter movement as it surged onto the public conscious with international protests several months ago, and its relationship to WILD's mission of being a wholly inclusive community, serving the needs of all members of the lighting community who identify as women. To that end, we began to plan a conversation between Black and Brown women in the lighting and design community to start developing next steps in eliminating systemic racism in the lighting industry and to begin to discover paths that might rectify the lack of diversity in the community. New York's event was preceded by an anti-racism conversation hosted by WILD Denver in August, and I highly recommend reviewing the recording found on the WILD website under resources. In addition to planning this event, WILD New York partnered with the Designers Lighting Forum of New York and the New York chapters of ILD and IES to create an initiative called Equity of Lighting Design, or ELD NYC. The goal of ELD NYC is to commence a long-term initiative to address diversity and inclusion within the lighting community. Our hope is that we can strengthen this community by having it reflect the diversity of our country through the tools of outreach, educational events, and industry policy. The first step in this process included a diversity survey of the existing community to help develop a baseline. That survey is still active until Wednesday this week, and we encourage all to participate and share the survey with colleagues. A link will be sent following this program. Early results from the Equity of Lighting Design survey show that only 16% of responders identify as people of color, and an even smaller percentage, under 3%, are Black or Brown women. For today's discussion, we are thrilled to have 4 panelists join us. They are Jessie Frias, a quotations project manager at Illuminico, Nell Reed, an HR administration partner at Pfizer Inc. North America, Laetitia Stephanos, a lighting designer at Fisher Moran Stone, and Nichol Murrell, systems inside sales at Barbizon Lighting. We are extremely grateful for the time they have contributed to making this event happen. The panel will be moderated by WILD committee member Megan Carroll of New York Digital Lighting and Controls Agency. And our event will begin with a panel discussion, loosely structured around questions developed by the panelists in concert with the many responses received via your registration questionnaires. And thank you to all so much for who responded. It will be followed by a Q&A section for any additional questions submitted today. We ask that you use the Q&A pop-up box located at the bottom of your screens to send these questions rather than the chat window. Thank you all again for attending, and I will now turn our proceedings over to Megan and welcome Jessie, Nell, Laetitia, and Nichol to the stage.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you very much to our panelists. This can be a difficult conversation to have, and we appreciate that you may be taking some level of risk, sharing your stories, sharing your personal experiences with us tonight. But this may be one of a few conversations that we have in our industry. And the goal here is that we want people to walk away with opened hearts and opened minds. We know we can't fix racism, that we may not have answers to some of these difficult or probing questions that we're going to talk about, but at least we will have awareness and we will have had the opportunity to hear from the 4 of you. So thank you so much for being here. Again, audience, you're all muted. We'll use the Q&A function for the Q&A at the end of the program. And we may not be able to get to all the Q&A, but we'll do our best. And there may be remaining Q&A that we'll take to the second discussion. All of that is to be determined. Some of the themes that we explored as we prepared this program were themes related to a career path, mentorship, outreach, and racism. These are the dominant themes that populated many of the pre-event questionnaires, as well as the issues that Laetitia, Nell, Nichol, and Jessie brought up and that they've dealt with in their career journeys. So let's talk about career first with Jessie. Jessie, how did you begin your career? How did you get here into this industry?
Thanks, Megan. Thanks for having me, and thanks for having the platform to have this very important conversation. As far as how I got into this industry, I think it's pretty much the journey of a lot of people in this industry. It was happenstance. It wasn't something that I planned to get into. I was a college student that needed a job, and I answered an ad in the New York Times to be a receptionist at a lighting rep firm. And when I went to the rep firm, I didn't get hired to be the receptionist. I actually got hired to be part of their customer service team for one of their departments. And that's pretty much how it started. I just stayed at that agency and moved on to other agencies. And based on my reputation and my connections and just networking with people who knew me, I've just been in the industry for 20 plus years now.
So that's Jessie's experience, common to many of us. I don't want to be ageist here, but I'm going to go to Laetitia because I think she might be the newest and maybe the youngest of us here today. So perhaps you had a different career path, Laetitia. How did you get to this place?
I actually went to school for interior design because that was my plan initially. The very first time I stepped into lighting was after I moved to Florida, after I graduated. A lighting manufacturer messaged me on LinkedIn one day with a job offer that I accepted. And it was a nice experience. I enjoyed learning about lighting, but I felt that I had to give interior design a second chance. So I left the industry to go back into interior design. I worked at a few companies, and eventually I decided to move back closer to my family in Connecticut. After I moved back, I started looking for work in New York. It took a while, but eventually a friend of mine that I met in Florida at a lighting trade show introduced me to a New York lighting rep, and this rep introduced me to FMS. So I went online, I checked out their portfolio, which I was very pleased with, and I thought with my lighting and interior design background, it would be a good opportunity. So I sent my resume. I got a call to come in for an interview, and I got a job. And I've been with yeah.
How long?
A year and a half.
And as an interior design student, were there any lighting courses in that program?
We did have one lighting course, yes.
Just one, okay. Nichol, I know we've met in the past on a couple of different occasions. I've met all of you in the past. But Nichol, I don't know how you got to be here either. Were you hired off the street? Did you study journalism and then find yourself a lighting designer at heart?
I actually got into the lighting industry based on someone that I was with at the time. They were an architect, and we were working together as a team, interior design in Florida. And from that, I transitioned into owning my own company, and then having met other people in the lighting industry, I decided after moving to New York to get into the lighting industry. I know we met, Megan, because I did work for a company that we did a lot of work together in, right. And so we got to meet in lots of events that happened. So that's how I got into the industry, was basically through someone else.
So common threads here so far are it's about network, it's about awareness, and maybe a little bit about taking some risks and pushing yourself, which is a good thing. Nell, you've left our industry, but you're still a very active member of WILD. But you're not a designer, you're not in marketing. You've had a very different journey here.
Correct, that's correct, yes. Well, first, thank you so much for this opportunity today. And also thank you to the other panelists today for taking this journey with us. And yes, similar to Jessie, I applied for a role at Arup at the time, and I got the job, and I supported the lighting team there for about 4 years. And during that time, the industry was new to me, so it was very important for me to discover different ways to acclimate myself to the industry and just learn more about it. And one way that I found I could do that was to seek out affinity groups. And that group happened to be WILD. And so I joined an active member, and I really developed not only more knowledge about the industry, but also just a happiness and a sense of community, and just a strong desire to stay connected to it even after I left the industry.
Great, thank you. Laetitia, what about you? Did you have any mentors as you went from interior design to a manufacturing, back to interior design, and then to FMS? It's been an interesting path you've been on. Did any mentorship occur along the way?
No, not in previous jobs. I didn't have anyone willing to take on this role with me, and honestly, no one that I felt I could relate to along my journey.
Jessie, what about you? We talked earlier in some conversations about some of the mentors you had. How did you find them? How did you find yourself a mentor? And is there something you could recommend to others that might be looking as well?
Well, as far as my journey is concerned, I didn't get what would be standard mentor till much later in my career in lighting. When I first started in the industry, I got advice, and sometimes it was advice that was kind of more self-serving to the person who was giving the advice versus kind of something that would benefit me. It was more of I'm telling you this, but it would eventually trickle down to help that person out. As far as the mentor that I chose was Barbara Montgomery. And the reason why I chose her was because, number one, she looked like me. And not that a mentor has to look like you, but there are times that is actually very beneficial in the sense of life experiences and things that person can help you navigate in this specific industry. What I loved about Barbara was that she was a Black woman, she was a mom, and she was unapologetically real. And that is the type of person that I always felt that I was. And because of that, I was like, this is the person that if I were going to pick a mentor in this industry, she was it. Because she was just it. She was that girl. She was that woman.
So you went out and found someone, and it's easy to understand how Barbara could be a mentor to not only you, but anybody else, any other woman in this industry today, but unique for your experience. Nichol, did anyone look over your shoulder and give you guidance?
Well, when I was in Florida, there was someone and she was very good. But when I moved to New York City, the person that actually mentored me is on this panel today. Jessie, Frias. She was my boss for a couple of years. She steered me in the right direction. She told me what I think is important and how to look at the world in the lighting industry itself. We did bump heads a few times, but at the end, she was my boss, but we got everything together. And, it's very important to have someone who mentors you, who also can understand you and understand as a woman, a Black or brown woman, what you might be going through in the industry. And she was one of those people that I could say helped me to better understand the industry.
And bumping heads is a natural part of a relationship between a manager and a subordinate. And I think sometimes we might get that confused. We think that, you can't be my friend. You can't see my point of view or say yes to me all the time. And the answer is no. It's called work because it's a work relationship. But out of that can come some very strong ties. Yes. But I understand that, again, Jessie looked like you. She had the same experiences. Yes. So that's an important takeaway, I think, that we're hearing, is that someone either reach out to a mentor that you identify with. And it seems it's very helpful to have someone who has similar experiences that you do.
And it created a friendship that remained after
Right.
everything. We no longer work together, but it remained.
It's a wonderful takeaway of our industry. And as we all are sitting here today, the four of you, myself included, we've all had a variety of opportunities within the industry. So it's all about networking. It's about maintaining relationships and making new ones. I think that's a very cool thing about our industry is we can reinvent, and it doesn't have to be just within this city. But Nichol, as we're talking now about the diversity issue or lack thereof, talk to me a little bit about the increased attention, with the increased attention now on racism, inclusion, equity, and diversity. Do you feel that you've been forced to take on additional work as a Black woman? Is your work different?
No, I do think it's important to understand that no matter what you do, no matter the skin color, Black, white, there's always, when you work for someone else, you're always going to have additional work or take on work. As a Black woman, I think it's different. Your journey is different. No matter what company you work in, your journey is always different. Again, it all boils down to mentorship and meeting someone that you can connect with and help you to understand better the field you're in, what you're doing, and just giving you guidance. Because I think no matter the race or color, you always need guidance. Someone to say, this is the step you need to take, this is the way you need to go. And I think that is very important for anyone, Black, white, brown. It's very, very important for us to have someone to help us along or lead us along in the right direction.
When I was reviewing this question, that quote that Ginger Rogers said came to mind. She could do everything Fred Astaire could do, but she did it backwards and in high heels. And I think that this is probably, the question here might be relevant in that way, because you're a Black woman, because you are a Black woman, is there more on your plate, more on your desk? And Nichol, you're saying not so much. Anybody else have any other comments that they want to add in on that? Is there something different you think about your work, your life? Going to a job site, perhaps to do some focusing or look at some defective product, quote unquote. Are you treated any differently as a Black woman? Or is it hard to say because you don't know what it's like to be a white woman on a job site?
That's what I was about to say. That I mean, I think we're as Black and brown people, we are treated differently in some cases and things that go around. But as I said, we've learned to adjust, I think, in a sense, to the way when we have to work in society, we've adjusted ourselves to it. I think everyone on this panel have some experiences in some way, be it you go to a job site and someone looks at you differently, or you have coworkers who may look at you differently. We all have that experience in somewhere. From you walk down the street, someone may look at you differently. It's because, again, it comes back to, it's diversity. We're different, and people look at things that are different.
I want to add something to that based on a personal experience. You are, as far as me, I'm speaking in the me. As far as I'm concerned, there have been times where I have walked into a job site and I have been treated differently, as though I may not have grasped the subject matter the same as my white counterparts. And unfortunately, I've had to, or fortunately, I've had to develop very thick skin and understand and consider the audience. And whatever I've done, I've had to do it in a way of constantly having to prove myself and show that I do and I have earned my position and the seat at the table, if you will. So there have been instances where, yes, as a Black woman, am I treated differently at a job site? Yes. Am I treated differently in a meeting? Yes, I have. Because for some reason, it seems as though our intelligence or our lack of grasping certain situations is put into questions as though we're not living in the same earth.
Yeah, I
So-
agreed. To Jessie's point, I think in general, people tend to be very judgmental, but even more so with Black people. It seems that we not only have to prove that we are capable, we have to prove it to men, not only to men, but also to white women. When it comes to criticism on our work, on our performance, on our behavior, it seems that the criticism we get tends to be harsher than our white peers. So I agree with Jessie's point.
I can speak,
Yeah, go ahead now, please.
I can speak to the point a little bit of additional work, because, and this is a double-edged sword, actually, because with the current climate, I've actually been part of and invited to several different discussions of this sort. Discussions around inclusion and diversity, and my experience as a Black woman in the workforce. And in some regards, it is additional work, and I'm happy to do it. And I want to be very clear with that. I'm happy to have the platform to do it. But it is, that type of the term that's used sometimes is emotional tax, right? Because these conversations can go very, very deep and very intense, and that is the idea behind it. But it is work. I do want to say that it is work.
So you use the term emotional tax as in TAX?
Yes.
And is that in relationship to navigating the conversations or the situation? These conversations you mentioned having, are they around being Black and white? Are they around diversity?
Yes.
And so you are the go-to person, or you are taxed with digging a little bit deeper to get into this.
Yes. Yes.
And Jessie's recommendation is developing a thick skin. And
That's what worked for me, though.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to apply to everyone because everyone's journey is completely different. I tend to be a person that, for me, I work on the distribution end, and although I have worked with a lighting designer, most of my journey has been on the distribution end. So you have to deal sometimes with contractors and distributors, and a lot of them are, when I started in this industry, much older and have a certain mindset. So it's kind of like now you go into a room full of white males who have a preconceived notion of who you are and what you represent, your level of intelligence, your level of grasping the subject matter. And you have to walk in there not as a fragile flower, because if you do, you get eaten alive. And for me, I thrive in those situations. I live for confrontation, I'm sorry.
I like to add on to what Jessie said. It is true that sometimes you can go into a job, a situation, and yes, you get that when people talk, it can happen in your work, or when they talk to you, it's like you don't understand or you can't grasp it. But I think again, everyone experience is different. So I think in some way, you have to learn to adjust a little bit to it, because you can't, let's say someone thinks you don't understand something, you have to, sometimes you adjust it. I think most of us Black and brown people, we can adjust to the jobs we're in. We adjust to the situation we're in. I think for most Black people, what we've done throughout our life is adjust ourselves to fit the situation that we're in. So it doesn't come off that we're too headstrong. We basically adjust ourselves.
So it's possibly that so that your life has changed the woman you may have been in different circumstances.
Yes, you make a lot of adjustments.
Are there ways that people who are not people of color can be mentors for you, or give you guidance or resources? I'm still kind of sifting through a question that came in. And it seems relevant to try to answer this in real time. So I'm going a little bit off script here. Are there specific ways that those of us who are not people of color and are concerned with being mentors or resources for our colleagues of color, how can this woman be more useful or a better support system? So someone is asking, she's not a person of color, she'd like to be a mentor or a support system. Is there something that you could guide her with, offer her to do?
Yeah, I think mentorship is important, but so is sponsorship. I think in the context of white women mentoring Black women, again, to Jessie's point, although as women, we deal with some discriminations that are more or less similar, in addition to that, Black women have to deal with racism. So, I think giving advice is not always enough to help navigate some of these issues that prevent us from achieving our goals. So that's why I think sponsorship is actually more important than mentorship, because a sponsor will go beyond giving feedback and they will be actively involved in helping the mentee advance their career. And that can be done in many ways. The sponsor will be an ally for the mentee, they will advocate for them, they will give recommendations, whether written or verbal, they will introduce the mentee to their network, not only introduce them, but they will also teach the mentee how to build and maintain these relationships. And they will use their platform to promote exposure and visibility. I think these are the type of actions that are helpful to help open up opportunities.
And so
to Letitia's point, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
To Letitia's point, as far as the sponsorship, that is very true, because how I've gotten in stayed in the industry has been through sponsorship. As far as recommendations, someone recommends me to another person, and therefore I'm able to get a job that way, or an opportunity is open based on the sponsorship versus the mentorship. So I have to thank, if any of my sponsors are on this, I have to thank you all for sponsoring me and helping me continue in my career in this industry.
Thank you.
Just to add on to Jessie's point, again, and Laetitia, it's very important for us, for Black and brown women, to have someone to sponsor them. It's very important for us to get that type of sponsorship that continues throughout, like, our career. It just doesn't start and then drop off. Because sometimes you can get a sponsor that starts with you, but then that sponsorship ends after a certain time. But the continuality of it, that's what makes it important. And that's what would keep us getting more involved and being hired in this industry, and not just be a 3% of it.
So finding sponsors,
yes,
for women of color to give you not just a single year's guidance, or to be a long-term partner, perhaps.
Yes.
And to guide you on a journey. Yes. What about, Nell, I want to go back to something you said about emotional tax. In those circumstances, and I'm sure the other three ladies have also been in these circumstances, how do you push back? Is there guidance you can give? Are there words or some behavior you can suggest when it's getting too uncomfortable or just too demanding or too personal?
Sure. It's a tough subject to navigate. So I really want to relate it to microaggression. And what that is, it's nonverbal and verbal behavior and language that in some ways are derogatory or condescending. And these behaviors and language can be very overt at times and kind of hard to identify. But for Black women, we feel it. We feel when it happens, and we know when it happens. But when we try to convey it in some ways, the trigger words can be, well, that couldn't have been, what that meant. Or, maybe you're blowing this a bit out of proportion. Or maybe you're reading too much into this. Or maybe you're just being too defensive or too sensitive. or someone playing devil's advocate. You know, it's kind of these ways to kind of deflect from talking about the occurrence and you know, when it happens. And so I feel like when a Black woman at a company starts to verbalize that something doesn't feel right or something is going wrong, or they were spoken to or treated in a way that did not feel right to them, it's so important to listen, you know, to actively listen, particularly when it's an underrepresented colleague, right? Listen compassionately, listen actively, create safe spaces, you know, for Black and Brown employees and women to express those thoughts and ideas. And one way to do that, you know, would be through affinity groups that are connected to the workplace, or employee resource groups, you know, some way that there can exist a transparency and a safe space to talk about these issues. That is really the biggest thing that any of us can do, is just create those open conversations and continue them.
I wonder, in these last many months, since spring, since even late 2019, if you have each felt a lightening up or a different in the work environment as a result of BLM. Has anything changed more to the positive, to more supportive or respectful?
I think we're using the words, right? The words are being spoken, and that's different, that's new, and it's important.
I mean, I think right now is not a fair time to judge, considering that we're all working remotely.
Yeah, right.
So that plays a big factor, because everyone's in their home, so you're not interacting in a workspace. So I don't know if I can say that things have changed whether it be positive or negative, because I've been working from home. So therefore there's really not much interaction other than with my kid and my husband. And they happen to both be Black. So, but to Nell's point, as far as creating a safe space and being a Black woman in sometimes a very high percentage white firms, it's just as, whenever we say something, at least it's been my experience, it doesn't hold the same weight as if one of my white female colleagues say it. It's, for a classic example, let's start with something that was very big for women and society in general, the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement was started by a Black woman. But it took a white woman to say Me Too to all of a sudden it became this like blown up movement. But it had been around, but it seems as though when a Black voice says this, it takes a completely different tone, and it takes a completely different energy than when a white person says it. And it's sad, because we're all dynamic, we all have great ideas, we all have input, and we all have experiences. Everyone's journey is individual, because we're all individuals, but it shouldn't be that Black women's individual journey should be quieter than a white woman's.
In that circumstance, when you're in the room, at the meeting, at the table, making suggestions, and you're not being heard, or you are experiencing microaggressions, how do you push back? You can't kick them under the table. We try not to do that anymore. What other behaviors, words, language, eye contact, what can you suggest to push back, to make yourself be heard, be seen?
You know, each situation is different, and you know, it depends on audience and context and so many other elements, but definitely just continuing to use your voice, you know, and make it clear that you have value to bring to the conversation, to the projects, you know, and that's why you're advocating for whatever the point is, that that you're making, but I think it again goes back to active listening on the other part, because when these words are spoken, at times they are received as I mentioned, being too defensive or being too aggressive, on the one hand, but sometimes if it's coming from a white woman, it's viewed as leadership in some ways, but when it's coming from a Black woman, it's viewed as a different feeling.
So perhaps, go ahead, Nichol.
To add on to that, I absolutely agree. I think Black women are viewed differently in companies. I think our voices are muted most. I think we don't get the opportunity to express ourselves more. We don't get the opportunity to basically be our best selves. I think because what happens when we start to speak, and as Nell said, we kind of get the walls. It's like no one's listening, but we're speaking. Our work are always questioned. So we question ourselves. And I think that's where having someone who can help you to, get around and like someone, a mentor, it doesn't have to be a Black mentor, but just someone you can go and sit and say, this is how I feel. My thoughts, my words are not being listened to. My work is not judged in the same way. How can you help me to move forward? I think a lot of it comes down to where the HR, CFOs, CEOs, just company need to be more open to, if you're going to hire a diverse group of people, and you have Black and brown people working with you, you have to be open to understanding the people that you hire, understanding the differences, so that it creates a safer space for everyone to work. If you don't do that, then you're always going to have some people going to feel more, and some people going to feel less. There's always going to be that, no matter if we talk about it, there's always going to be that differences. Just like men get more money, than women. It's always going to be, Black women is always going to be seen at a lesser level than white women or men.
Mm-hmm. So Nell is saying, use your voice, which I think is great advice. And what I envision that means is repeat yourself, repeat it with a smile on your face. Don't go sarcastic, don't go ballistic, don't yell and scream, but be emphatic, be clear, be consistent, be persistent. Nichol is again talking about going to her mentor with a specific problem and looking for guidance that way. But I want to go back to Laetitia's. There's been some questions coming in. Laetitia, can you define for the difference between mentor versus sponsor? Or maybe the four of you have experiences on that. How does a mentor different than a sponsor?
I think the mentor's role is to give advice, feedback, and just overall help us identify the tools we need to acquire certain skills. They basically give us intellectual guidance. On the other hand, the sponsor goes beyond that. He goes beyond giving feedback and advice, and he is actively involved in helping the mentee. So that's the main difference. If mentorship is a little more passive and it's just about giving advice, whereas sponsorship is about actions.
Yeah, and if I could jump into that a little bit, a mentor, to put it simply, and this is maybe an oversimplified statement, but a mentor speaks to you. A sponsor is going to speak on your behalf. It's going to almost speak for you. Like when they're in the room having those conversations about who should get a project, who should be up for a promotion, that sponsor is the person that is going to speak your name and speak up for you. The sponsor is going to be the one that if they're having a conversation about a new project coming up, you know what, I know the perfect person for that. And they're going to speak your name. They're going to kind of open up those pathways for you to support your advancement. Whereas a mentor, is someone that you can check in with periodically, bounce ideas off of them, get feedback, things like that. And it's all very, very helpful, as a whole. But the sponsorship part of it is just powerful.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Did somebody else have anything they wanted to say on that issue?
I mean, I just think that a sponsor is someone who literally kind of sticks their neck out. To add to Nell's point, they stick their neck out for you in situations as far as like recommendations and making sure that they put your name out there as though this is the ace that I have for this specific project or position or job, if you will.
Good. Thanks for talking on that. Okay, let's talk about a couple of other things, because we've had such great varied conversations in these last few weeks getting ready for tonight. Let's talk about challenges to finding work in the industry. Things change, economies come and go. Have you had any unique challenges to finding work in the industry, and how might you have overcome those challenges? Nichol, you're saying, yeah, what?
I've had challenges getting into the work in lighting and design industry. I remember going to a job, getting hired, and sitting one day with a manager. She was out, we were just having a dinner, and she said, we actually, it was a company predominantly white, and she's like, oh, we needed to add some color.
Oh.
And it was, for me, it was really like, we eating, we're drinking, and she said that, and she's like, we needed to add some color. So it kind of was like a smack in my face, because you're not expecting someone to say it, but it came off because most people don't say it to you, but she basically said that's why they wanted to hire someone, because they needed to have someone of color in their office. Now, I do not look at the word people of color because I consider myself a Black woman. So for me, it was just like, I brushed it off, but it was a very difficult part, and when you go to get jobs, people they smile at you, they take your resume, they see your experience, and they're like, just pass you on. And it can be very difficult at times, and stressful and depressing at times.
So I guess she was honest, perhaps, or insensitive, or both.
I think she was both, but
Any other advice, though? Go ahead, Nell.
I might go with inappropriate.
Insensitive, inappropriate. Thank you. Okay, yeah. Stupid. Anyone, any other comments about finding work in the industry and how to overcome any challenges?
Yeah, I think finding work in general is hard enough, especially in New York. It's so competitive. I would say, just like a lot of people, there's been a lot of rejections, and who knows why. There could be a million reasons. Now, the thing that raises a flag for me is when we get ridiculous offers. Like one day I was asked to start with a 3-month non-paid internship just to see if I was the right fit for the company. Now, this is something I would have probably considered if I was still in school trying to build my resume, but I had been out of school for a few years. I'm an adult with bills to pay, so I'm not working for free. So I tried to argue my case, and I basically said, listen, my portfolio speaks for itself. I do have the qualifications. The response I got was, I do see that you have the qualifications, but you're still missing a few things. So therefore, I don't want to take a risk. So the simple fact that this person considered me a risk, and they just second guessed my abilities, and they did not take my credentials at face value, for me, that speaks volume. Now, I think your question was, how do you overcome that? I think you just don't settle, and you keep looking until you find the right place for you.
Exactly. And you push back, and you pointed out your strengths, your portfolio, your experiences, and then you said, no, thank you. And that can be the only way around that.
Yeah.
Anyone else wanted to comment on that? There's,
Yeah, similar. You know, my intent was to really stay within the industry, but as I started to interview and meet with different companies, the resounding issue for me was just being lowballed for salary, and it it was just um, it was just a little mind blowing, you know, and to echo the comment, you know, I have a family, I've got responsibilities, and I've got the experience, the history, so you know, I had to make that decision to move on and do the best thing for myself and my family. But it was a difficult choice, and it was a sobering choice. But it was one that I felt that I had to make at the time.
so know your self-worth and know the market value of the role.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But even
Let's
knowing
talk-
those things, sometimes you can, it feels as though you not necessarily push back, but yes, you'll state your worth, and you're still finding yourself, at least for me, that you have to compromise and sometimes go for a lower salary, even though you know a person with your tenure deserves more. Because in speaking to like some of the younger white ladies in this industry who pretty much are babies and just started, a lot of them are making a whole heck of a lot more money than I was making when I was that age. And some of them sometimes make more money than what what women of color or Black women are making now that have been in the industry for a long time.
Yep.
So it's a rough thing. Like it's and the thing is like when you discuss it, having the discussion, what we're viewed as is like there's like an incredulousness with certain audiences, as though it's like, really? I
So the
don't know,
glass
maybe
ceiling,
it's like,
your glass ceiling hasn't shattered. How thick is that glass ceiling, Jessie, and others? I mean,
well,
let's talk about the glass ceiling. Is it thicker, thinner, unbreakable? How do you
I
break it
mean,
too?
it's, for me, like in some ways, the glass ceiling is thicker than before, because the mere fact that with all the strides that we've taken, we're in 2020 and I'm still having to have that conversation speaks volumes.
Yep.
That I still have to say that I'm not paid what I'm worth. So that means that we basically like, I have to constantly pitch myself and show you how Black women are hardworking, intelligent, dynamic, and that we have earned everything we've gotten, that we've earned the seat at the table. Not to overuse that phrase, but it seems like that's the phrase that people seem to relate to. So in that aspect of things, because of the way things are moving extremely slow, and that we're still having this conversation, and although I am very appreciative that we're having this conversation, I'm just hoping that it doesn't fall on deaf ears, that we are having this conversation and that this is going to move forward, and that everyone is going to look at it and open their hearts and minds and just understand where we're coming from. It's not a complaint. It's not a victim impact statement. These are actual facts. And we just need people to understand that we are worth what we request. And for me, as far as the glass ceiling is concerned, to go back to the original question, I don't think we've even scratched the ceiling yet. We're still trying to find the ladder to hold it so that someone can go and basically break it.
But related to this discussion, a question came in, and I'm going to read it. How much of a role does the lack of Black group economics play into the current situation? Would more Black-owned lighting businesses help expedite change?
Absolutely.
And that's not a question we've talked about before, but I think it bears answering a review.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Hands down.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But with that, I think there needs to be the exposure to the industry itself,
Yes.
which is a separate, which can be a separate conversation, but it's the exposure to it. When I speak to people about lighting design, the average person really doesn't even understand what that means, right?
Right.
And so, you know, there needs to be, you know, more highlights and a push to kind of bring attention to the industry itself. And then that's, you know, that's a step in the right direction. And most certainly, you know, if there were more companies that were Black owned within the industry, hands down, that would be so impactful.
Thank you. Yep.
To speak on that, I think exposure is very important, and I think it needs to start in colleges, maybe high school, just getting young Black and brown kids more involved, letting them, you know, understand, maybe going in, showing. I work in a lighting company, so I know we do go out and we go to schools and, you know, show our product and kids about theater, teach them about control system. But I think more should be done to go out to schools and to educate people, young, you know, Black and brown kids, and maybe programs, just maybe taking them in, give them an internship for 2 weeks, just over the holidays, so they can have a better understanding about the lighting industry. Because besides opening more businesses, Black business in lighting, maybe getting more our kids more involved in it, so they would want to go out and study it, so they can come and work in the industry, and that would create like a foundation, in a sense, to build, you know, Black companies that focus on lighting, controls, anything like that. That's what I think is important.
Absolutely. I need to echo that too, because that is huge. Kind of tapping in to the population even before college would be such a good step in the right direction. And particularly now that so much of what we do is virtual, I think that it opens up a lot more doors to do that. You know, this past summer, I mean, you know, who knows how next summer will be, but this past summer, I can say that I just saw so many summer camps, just targeting so many different industries and areas. And you know, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you know, that's what it takes sometimes to spark the interest.
Yep.
So there's questions coming in. There's also some questions we saw earlier on the registrations, and they all relate to making our lighting community more inclusive, more welcoming. Sounds like we haven't done that, but it also sounds like we are still under-marketed as an industry. We need to do more marketing to help build Black businesses. The question now is, how do we create a sense of belonging and inclusion? Talk about WILD more, get more people aware of WILD.
Absolutely, sure.
Definitely. That is
that's
one step.
way.
I think talking about WILD, I think it boils down to educating, again, people on what it is, what lighting is, what lighting pertains. You know, before I came into this industry, I came from interior design. So yes, I know lighting, but I didn't know the whole intricate lighting. So I think by educating, and again, it starts like high school, maybe even, you know, younger, just getting the kids involved, doing programs that kids can come in, come and visit factories, manufacturers. These kind of things will help to maybe open, you know, make it more open for everyone. Because most kids, when they leave school, they're not thinking about, like Black and brown kids, oh, let me go and do an internship in a lighting company, when they can go do something else. So getting them more involved in it and creating a where they want to know more, that would be interesting, and it would bring, like, it would make more Black and brown kids want to get involved. It would also open up the opportunity for us to be, you know, sponsorship, mentorship, all these things that we're talking about.
So we need to reach out more to schools, to industry, perhaps take trips back to your colleges, your schools, personally, you going back to your classrooms and talking about what we do and what the career opportunities are.
But this, Megan, this should not only just be in communities that have private schools or schools that can afford it. I think going into inner city schools would also help. It would, you know, giving kids that opportunity in inner city schools to see what it is.
There's career fairs too that people from the lighting industry can participate in, and you know, and basically show all the different aspects of lighting, because lighting can be very fun. And it's like, if you show children like all the different things of how important lighting is, that it's one of those things that it's the unsung hero of life, because bad lighting can just basically like wreck the whole day.
All right, thanks. Let's go back to a couple of other things we've been talking about, and this is interesting, and I think, and this will help our audience. Here's a question I'm going to read. And Nell, Jessie, you were talking about this. How do we help your voices be heard if you're being silenced by others? Well, we avoid talking over and forever about women of color. So we don't want to appropriate your conversation, your issue, but how do we help support you? How do we help amplify your voice, your issue, your talent? How do we, if we're in that room with you, or if we're in the situation with you on the job site, we don't want to misappropriate.
No, first and foremost, believe us. Right? Like, let's start there. Believe us. There's
Be
no
supportive.
there's no need to play devil's advocate to try to deflect from the issue. If we're speaking on it, it's because it is real. Right? And if that means kind of mediation, you know, in some regards, like, you know, a third party even, but just like bringing the parties to a table to discuss it openly. Believe us. Do not brush it under the rug. Do not, you know, just try to ignore it or pretend that it's not what it is. That's where it starts. It's just believe us.
I agree. It's just basically offer support in all aspects, but not passive aggressive support where it's like, I'm here for you, but maybe you need to revisit how you looked at it, because that happens sometimes. It's just be supportive, believe us, understand that our experiences are different in the way we're being treated, and it is what it is. Just listen and believe.
Okay. All right. That's something that seems simple enough to do for everyone. Another question is there a way we can educate ourselves so that we're not looking to you to explain to us that you're being disadvantaged?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there are books.
But how do we educate ourselves? What do we do? Is that a tough question to answer?
Not really. I mean, there's a plethora of literature. I mean, I'm happy to provide a list, you know, of authors and books that can be read on the subject. You know, perhaps just having candid conversations with Black women, Black people, not using terms like "I don't see color," because that's dangerous.
And maybe
you know?
it's even this conversation here right now tonight with 150 of our closest friends. Oh no, I'm sorry, that was almost 200. Maybe just raising awareness right now in this conversation is a big step towards that, because we didn't know what it was like to be you in the room at the job site or in those circumstances. Is there something you'd like the panelists, is there something you'd like to see happen from this conversation to help us begin? Sorry, I lost the question. What would the panelists like to see happen from this conversation as awareness begins to unfold in lighting and more broadly in the design community? What would you like to see happen as a result of tonight's discussion?
You know, my hope from tonight's conversation is that it triggers a thought process. These are very big ideas, very big themes that can penetrate very deeply. And maybe we'll come away tonight with a lot of questions and not many answers. That's okay, because the catalyst is to trigger the thought process. Think about these themes, think about these ideas, and then you can, you know, find ways to put action behind those ideas. But, you know, it starts with conversations, talking about it, just communicating authentically and fluidly about these topics.
That's a great point, because we know we can't end racism tonight. We don't have all the answers. And some of these things I'm bringing up now are coming in real time. And I'm trying to get to as many of them as possible. So are there any concrete actions we can talk about though? Anything we can say we'd like to see happen at the workplace tomorrow? Yep.
I
Nichol.
think workplace wise, and I think it's to do with, again, management, you know, CEOs, CFOs, managers, just a corporate structure. I think more educating themselves more on how to deal with a diversity in the workplace. But I think tonight, we're just only able to, you know, open up, as Nell said, just so people can leave with something different and a better understanding. But I think when it comes to like the workplace, I think it has to do with from the top. It starts at the top and then it comes down. It trickles down from the top. So the people at the top have to be able to identify where the issues are, how you can fix them, and how you can structure your company that, you know, it's more open to diversity. And that would be a benefit in the end, because people want to work in a company where they're comfortable. People want to work where they're not feeling judged. You know, they want to be able to sit with their bosses and managers and say, oh, I feel this is happening, and not feel, as, you know, Nell pointed out, attacked, or that they're not saying the right things, or, you know. So I think it starts within the company from the top and it comes down. In anything, that's where it starts.
Absolutely. It starts with leadership.
Industry, it starts from just having this conversation.
So is there any difference in the quote unquote office? And again, we're all remote, but previously, was there any difference in the office versus in the field at a job site or at a trade show, for example? Any difference in the way you were treated? Was your treatment any difference in the office? Do you have a posse of peers at your office versus in the field? You got to put on your armor, or is it pretty much the same?
For me, where I work for the last couple of years, the companies I've worked with, as I said, I've worked with Jessie, and we had a great office. You know, the workers, the co-workers, we worked as a team. We were very good as a team. And where I work now, we also work as a team. We have differences, but we definitely work as a team with different people. We come with different ideas, and but we work as a team. I think it's to do with it's like everything. The first step is from the top, come down. You know, you create an environment where everybody feels comfortable to work. And that's where, you know, it comes from, and it starts. Because most of us spend like 8-9 hours of our lives every day in an office. So we have to be comfortable in it.
Would any of you recommend working in the lighting industry to a friend if they asked you?
Yes.
Sure. Sure.
We would. And
Yeah.
Laetitia, why is it? What do you like about it? Do you like being is the designer the best part of it, as opposed to when you were manufacturing? Because you've had a couple of interesting roles in the short time you've been in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, working with at the manufacturer, I don't think that I'm a best salesperson. However, what I do enjoy is designing, and the thing that I like about lighting is that it's a good mix with between art and science, and it's very logical.
Aha. That's very articulate. And it's a good combination of different parts of your brain, different disciplines. But Jessie, you've had maybe the longest and diverse and hard, possibly, career places. Would you recommend it to a friend? Or anyone, or would you go recruit someone out of school or talk to someone about how great it is and they should join you?
That's a tough one, because it's a yes and no question. Yes, based on where I'm at right now, the company that I'm at right now, I would definitely recommend, because I happen to work with someone who is not a micromanager, values my opinion, values my input, is someone who I respect. Not that I haven't respected a lot of my previous employers, but there have been certain instances where I've had to navigate difficult situations. So it's, would I want my daughter to get into lighting? No.
All right. Thanks for that. There's another couple comments out here. One of them particularly is talking about a woman at HOK, and that she is quite a leader in her industry. And at the moment, I have misplaced that comment. Nora, sorry, it's here somewhere. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to drop that line of comment or questioning. There's also still some confusion on sponsor versus mentor. How does one find a sponsor or ask someone to be a sponsor? So Laetitia, I think you were one of the unique people that had a sponsor. So did you find someone in your firm or in any of your career experiences thus far? Did you go say, would you be my sponsor and would you help me fight some battles?
No, it was nothing official like that.
Oh.
It just happened naturally. It's just someone that I met in the industry that I developed a relationship with, friendship with, who then introduced me to someone else in the industry who then put me in contact with FMS. So I guess it's all about having conversations with people, getting to know them, building relationships, really. But it was nothing official, like, hey, would you want to be my sponsor?
Okay. So that's great. It was happenstance. They had seen you conduct yourself in a professional situation, and it evolved somewhat organically in that way. And another comment is, if you think a junior membership for industry-related groups like WILD, well, we have no fee, so anybody can join anytime. That's my plug. Just bring your potluck, because sometimes it's still BYO. So would junior memberships help in attracting new talent, new young talent to the industry, such as IES, where younger students have the opportunity to come and interact with professionals at events and seek mentors? Any comment on that?
I think that would be helpful.
Definitely.
Sure. I think that would be helpful, but there also, I think, has to be a mechanism that outwardly advertises that.
Yep.
That there's, like kind of some force behind that, like, at a career fair that's developed by leaders in the industry that then promotes, those activities, or, maybe somehow integrating at the expos, like the numerous lighting expos that exist throughout the year, creating an element in that broadly advertises, come in for to get educated about it.
Okay, good. And many organizations do have junior memberships. It's just, again, getting that organization out in front of the possible members, getting in front of young members. Someone also is asking about past projects that you've enjoyed in the industry. And this is coming from a person who says, I'm a Black person with an electrical engineering background, and I'm very interested in lighting design and more on the design aspect. So that means you all had experiences there, but perhaps Jessie or Laetitia, you've had unique design focused experiences. Anything that you can comment on particularly that you enjoyed? A moment where there was an aha moment or something that was really satisfying?
Yeah, actually, so FMS has a pretty impressive portfolio. And for me, what I really enjoyed was when I was asked to help focus the lights for the tribute, for the 9/11 tribute. That's a very humbling experience. So yeah, I don't know.
I think that's probably the end all be all.
Yeah.
Jessie, any comments from you? Because you've seen a variety of experiences too on the design
When I worked for Schwinghammer Lighting, there were a lot of different types of projects that we worked on that we were involved in that you would see it from like its raw like lump of clay, and then when you would see like the beauty and the grandeur of the finished product, it was always kind of like something that I would like going to job sites sometimes, like especially like Bill would make these beautiful high-end retail stores that looked gorgeous, and it was great just going to see them after it was done and understand that, hey, and Nichol knows this, it was like we busted our butts to make sure that this happened. Like people have no idea what it's like behind the scenes of making sure that got there and it looks this great.
So it's being able to put your name on a finished product, or it's being able to put your name on a Lumen Award-winning project.
Yes.
And it's also the satisfaction of building something together, of being part of something that's bigger than you are as an individual, functioning as a team.
It was definitely the part of the team that was great. It was like a high five for all. Job well done.
Yeah, very satisfying.
Yeah.
What about advice for Black or brown women entering the industry today? If there's just one thing that you can say so we'd have 4 comments from each of you.
Put yourself out there, network.
All right.
Join organizations.
I agree with Laetitia. You have to join a lot of the organization, go to a lot of the networking events. I mean, Megan, you've seen me in mostly everything in your building. I would come. I go to all the events I can go to, because I think networking is also a way of coming back to the word sponsorship and mentorship. When you network, you can find someone who can be your sponsor or your mentor. So it's
Thanks.
important.
I would say be a sponge. Absorb every bit of knowledge that you possibly can, because that will open many doors for you, whether it be sponsorship, mentorship. Just make sure that you learn as much as you can.
Yes.
I would say continue to have these bold conversations about inclusion and diversity and racism and the experience as a Black woman in this industry. You know, it can be scary and tough, and you have to gauge the appropriateness of it at the time, but don't let it ride. Like, be brave, be bold, have the conversations.
Do any Black lighting organizations exist that we're aware of? Do any of those organizations exist at the lighting shows and conferences?
I'm not sure about lighting organizations, but I know that some people in our office are members of NOMA, National Organization of Minority Architects.
Yep.
So that's one of them.
So NOMA is a good contact for networking. And someone else had asked if any of you are aware if there's ever been a conversation between IALD and IES and NOMA as a way of working toward equity within the profession. And I wouldn't think so either, but that is a brilliant question, Elizabeth. Thank you. And I think that's something we can all take action on. Some of us involving IES, IALD, WILD, and reaching out to NOMA and seeing how we can expand here and create a safe space, a unique community for women of color, Black and brown women in the industry. We're pushing the clock now a little bit. Were there any other questions or comments from our panelists? Anything you want to share before we walk away?
No, I think it's been this has been good. This has been a great conversation, some really thought-provoking questions and comments. And I've just been really pleased to be a part of this.
I second that.
That's great. And it looks like we have a new organization now from Robin Miller. Thank you very much. It will be WILD, Be Wild, Black Women in Lighting. So this is great. We now have a new sister organization. This is great. I don't think there's anything else we can get to right now in that little bit of time that we have left. I'm flipping through the questions. And we know we didn't answer everything that was on our agenda or coming in, but I think we've raised a lot of awareness. And I'm missing some questions, sorry, but I think that's about it right now. Thank you so much, all panelists, for being here. Thank you for sharing, for exposing. We've all learned a lot. I think it's been a little bit fun in the rehearsals, at least backstage, that nobody saw. And if any of you were looking at the chats, which I know you said you were turning off, there's a lot of incoming saying, thank you very much for sharing. Thank you so much. People are looking to see if they could reach out to you. And if people want to reach out to you personally, can we suggest that they find you on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
Definitely.
so LinkedIn is a safe space for any of our attendees to reach out to Laetitia, Nell, Jessie, or Nichol. Yes, this has been recorded, so we will be posting this up on our website or on Facebook, on YouTube. Our next event is in development. We know that we're working towards a December charity event, party online. We're still working out some of that, but our Facebook is the best place to go find information about WILD. And I'm so pleased at all these comments that are coming in. Thanking you, ladies, for being here and for talking like this. It's been very helpful, very enlightening. So thank you so much. Good night, and we will continue the talk.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.